So now we've done pre-gouging, we're going to talk about gouging. And this means getting a gouging machine or access to one. Another expensive piece of equipment, but I found that if you have control of the whole process from tube right through to finished reed, it's a lot better. This stage, when you've now split the cane and you've taken out the pith with the pre-gouger, and you've ended up, as I said before, about 180. Mine are actually a little bit thinner, I found. They're 150. So we're close to a finished gouge. You can see from the cane whether it's green, whether the grain is straight, whether the pieces are straight, so you can see quite a lot. Lately I've been just putting everything together and seeing if it works or not, just to prove to myself whether it's worth it. So all this looks okay. Obviously if it's completely bent, it's better to discard it now rather than spend time on it. But with green cane, the jury is out for me because I've made some reeds that work with reasonably green cane, which means chances are it's not seasoned as long as it should have been. So on my gouging machine and on most gougers, it has a guillotine, which is set with a mark so you can cut them to 120 millimeters, which is the full size of a piece of cane. This is where what I said about the pre-gouger, sometimes it takes more off one end than the other or mangles it. So I won't automatically just take off one end. I will look and see, okay, if that's a bit bent or a bit too thin, let's take off one end a bit more than the other. So I'm really trying to use the best pieces. So with that one, for instance, I might do that end and then say, okay, that's got a fault in it. And like the pre-gouger, the gouger is going to be a bit ruthless in splitting the bits that aren't the right shape. So it's also going to select for you what not to waste time on. Some people do this wet, some people do it dry. If your knife is sharp, on the blade on the machine, dry is fine, but as it gets blunter, even soaking it 10 minutes will soften the cane a bit. So we have a few pieces here of cane, which is the right length, 120 millimeters, which will fit into the bed of the gouger. It has to be that length to go in. Now all machines are slightly different. This one has lovely spring mechanism, so that I'm going to feed in the piece of cane that end and just lift this lever and it's going to hold the cane. And then with the blade sharp and the gouger clamped down, I'm not putting much pressure on it, I'm letting the blade do the work, and 4 strokes and it was done. That's because I'd pre-gouged it. Now you can imagine if I hadn't pre-gouged it, I've got to take off another or half a millimetre of fibres from the inside, so that's a lot more work for your right arm and a lot more work for the blade. But that's come out as a gouged piece of cane. Let's just do the other ones. And again, often I'm standing for this. If the pre-gouger has gone below where the blade is going to go here, sometimes it's chewed a hole, then as long as it's not in the area of the reed you're going to be blowing on, if it's right at the ends and there's a little bit out, you can still make a reed. But on the whole, you want to make sure the gouger is taking off these nice smooth chips evenly. So we've got 3 pieces of gouged cane now, which look okay. I'm going to check the measurements. I have it set to about 120, which is a reasonably thin gouge. So you're using the cane closest to the bark. Some people go right down to about 1 millimetre. That's going to be very close to the bark and make a reed response in a different way. Average is 120 to 135 millimetres. 1.2 to 1.3 millimetres. So with this little micrometer, I zero it off. What are we in the middle here? 131. Happy with that. They won't be the same. 127. 134. So that's on the thicker side. One I did earlier, though, came out at 121. It is all within my range where I feel that I'm using close enough to the bark to make a reed with some ping, not too soft that it's going to be flabby, but not so close to the bark that it's going to be like too hard.